All right. Well, welcome back to class. This is the fourth Advent Sunday. If you've been following along, this is the Sunday before Christmas. And I'm not lighting candles in the room today, but this is a very special time where the story of the Magi and the story of the Star of Bethlehem are told. So I thought it'd be fun for us to go over that again. I did teach on it somewhat last year. Last year when I taught on this, I combined together the shepherds, the angels, the Magi, and the star. It was too much in one lesson. So this year, I've taken it apart. If you hadn't had a chance yet to see last week's class, we went over the shepherd and the angels. And that's an awesome story. And kids love that one. You ought to go back and listen to it and then show them some of the pictures. But the Magi and the Star of Bethlehem is one that has challenged many Christians because oftentimes Christians cannot explain who these Magi are, and they can't explain how the Star of Bethlehem happened. So we're always seeking out, trying to find answers. But if they come to my class, they will learn. I did a lot of research on this. Even from last year to this year, I continue to do more research. So the presentation, if you saw it last year, it'd be some of the same slides, but also I've added some more detail. It's the detail part that I like to look into. And so with that, we'll start the Magi first, the wise men from the east. So in Matthew chapter 2, last week we were in Luke. So this week we're in Matthew. So it says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him.' When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him." So we're going to break that down, look at it further, and then we got some more verses after this. But it's interesting that the traditional nativity scene, traditional picture of the nativity scene, we see is quite different from what took place actually. There's Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, of course, that were there in Bethlehem, with shepherds usually in the nativity scene. But what about those wise men? Were they there the night Jesus was born?
No.
Was there only 3?
No.
Did they bring small boxes? Although greeting cards and movies paint a picture of the shepherds and the wise men all kneeling together before Jesus the night he was born, history reveals something different. And so that's why we're looking at this part. This is now taking place 2 years later after Jesus was born. And a lot of people are like, what? That's not how it looks up on the stage. All right. So it said, "Behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem." And I've told you before that this word for behold doesn't grab our attention like it does in the Greek. In the Greek, this behold is a word that means, wow, this is amazing, incredible. See, it's got this powerful punch to it, and yet when we read it in the English, behold. Behold. This word is
exclamation mark.
Yeah. And the word is followed by this word wise men. And you do notice it is in the plural. It says wise men. Okay. And so the plural word is magos. And magos is the plural of the Magi. Okay. So I did not know that last year because I didn't pay attention to it. I just kind of said, okay. So Magi, that's what I've always heard. And I used the word Magi for the entire presentation last year. This year, I'm going to use the real word, magos. And we're going to get used to hearing it, all right? Which is foreign to our hearing because we like the word Magi. You know that. By the way, the word magos, or also Magi, is where we get the word magic and magician. Comes from the same word. All right. So these we're going to learn a little bit more about why they're called wise men, why they were magicians, and what does that mean. And it's right there in the middle of our Bible, in the very beginning story, that we have some magicians showing up to worship Jesus. They're pagans. They're foreigners. They're not Jewish.
Better be careful. We'll have an uproar with the other Christians. You keep saying that.
Oh, yeah, uproar. All right, so this is not your normal scene that we would think of. We learned last week that the shepherds were not your normal shepherds either. Remember? They're Levitical shepherds. They're clean shepherds.
Yes.
They're not low-life, scummy, unclean.
Educated.
All right, they're highly educated, and they're guarding those sheep for the purpose of the sacrifice. So
ask you later.
angels went to them. Yes.
Pastor said that they weren't able to go to temple.
Yes.
If they were clean, they could go to temple, couldn't they?
You know, what can I say? The pastor needs a little bit of
I almost went.
You know, I have learned over the years, I don't correct any of the pastor stuff, but I understand the purpose of what he's saying.
Right, yeah.
And in this case,
Yeah.
most people use the story of the shepherds in order to evangelize that anybody can hear from God.
Right.
Because look at those dirty shepherds. But I want you to get the story straight. And the story straight is that they were Levitical shepherds. Okay, they were priests of the Levi tribe. Well, the same thing here. Who are these magicians? Who are these wise men? They're godly people. But most of the time we don't think of the pagans knowing the Lord. All right, so we're going to learn about that also. This is a fascinating story. Well, Magi, they're called the kingmakers, and we're going to find out why. So Herodotus, who is a Greek historian, and some of you may be familiar with classical education, Herodotus, who is the father of history, I don't think he was the first one to write history books. You know, I think the Bible has a lot of history books long before him. But, you know, he's famous for that. So if you go to him, the Greek historian, he says that the Magi are a special caste of sacred leaders of the Medes. They were known as the wise men or the sages for Persia. Where's Persia today? Iran, all right? So they were wise men from Persia or from Iran today, and we don't normally think of anything good coming out of that area, all right? But a lot of good comes, and there was a lot of believers, surprisingly. But these wise men, these sages, also were keepers of sacred knowledge, particularly the interpretation of dreams, omens, and celestial events. The stars. Now, erroneously, some people say that they were into astrology. No, it wasn't astrology. It wasn't horoscopes. It was the signs and seasons that God has placed into the heavens. And they were aware of those. And so they have something that they studied called the Star Gospel, the good news in the stars. And I didn't bring any of it into this story today, but in the future I might, because I'm doing a study right now called Testimony of the Heavens, God's redemption plan preserved in the stars. And it's a 12-week Bible study. 12-week Bible study of all the signs in the heavens and their names and how they correspond to the Star Gospel, or to the Gospel of Jesus. Just to kind of give you a little example here. If we start with the zodiac, the virgin, the Messiah would come from a virgin. And as you go around, you end up with the lion, the tribe of Judah. Okay? And so each one of those, the names and the stories behind it, some of them been corrupted by, the normal history has corrupted some of the stories into Greek mythology, Roman mythology, things like that. But as you study the names of them, they start to reveal the truth of the star. And so anyways, that's the Star Gospel, which I'm currently studying. I think it's fascinating. And so going forward, I was supposed to turn that off. There we go. These guys were also studiers of the stars. And we're going to find out why as we continue on. So the Magi often acted as power brokers. They were leveraging their spiritual authority and wealth to support or to oppose contenders for throne. or I should put plural here, for thrones, because it was multiple countries that they were doing this. They were the ones that would come in and decide whether or not someone should be a ruler in other countries, surprisingly. And I'll show you some of that in a moment here. And because their favor is what these other countries were looking for, what does the Magos say about this ruler? If they were in favor, then they would anoint that person as their next king. If they were not in favor, it would cause them to have to pick another ruler. These Magi's have that much power, and we don't normally think of them that way. So in some instances, the rulers sought their approval as a way to solidify their claim to power. Especially if there was political unrest, they would call in the Magi or the Magos to come in and help out, solve who's going to be the next ruler of this country. What?
Everything
Yes.
old is new again.
So I have some of them named for you. If you're interested, who did they influence? Oh, by the way, it was for over 1,000 years. Okay, it wasn't just during the time of Jesus. So here is some of the rulers. So I got the top 7, and actually inside of each of these dynasties, there are multiple kings, multiple rulers. And so you can see, in 625 BC, all the way up to 651 AD. So for 1,000 years there, we have all of these different groups being influenced by the Magi, the Magus. We have Cyrus the Great. You guys know who that was? Cyrus the Great?
Greek.
During the time of Daniel. Daniel and Cyrus. Cyrus's name is actually prophetically in the book of Isaiah. And his name was in there 400 years before he was even born. And it said that he would free God's people. And so under Cyrus the Great is when God's people were sent back from Babylon back to Israel. So that's one of the examples. And Daniel was the one that showed that to Cyrus. He says, look, you were prophesied. There's a whole story there. We don't have time for that, but it's a fun one. Maybe we'll make some time in the future. Alexander the Great. Yeah. Amazingly, Alexander the Great surrounded himself with wise men. Many of them were from the Magus and so on. So they influenced rulers by doing what? They legitimized the rule. Their religious authority conferred divine legitimacy because they were a religious type of sect. And the other rulers, even other pagan rulers, thought that they could bring blessings to them, and so they would call them in. They were advisors to monarchs, and they took their knowledge of the stars and mystic wisdom, and they shared that. They were involved in succession crisis when they couldn't have a stable political situation. They'd call in the Magus, and the Magus would come in and fix it. This is important to know because now you're going to understand why Herod the Great was upset when they came. I don't know if you remember that from the introduction. The introduction, I read that at the bottom. It says that all of Jerusalem was upset. We always say, oh, that's because they know that, the king of the Jews has been born. No, it's because the Magus were coming. And the Magus are the king makers and the king removers. Right? And in 20 years earlier, Herod the Great had gotten into some trouble. He was struggling to become the king of Jerusalem. He's not in the David line. He's an outsider. He's actually a pagan that the Romans appointed him to be the king of Israel. And the Magus was called in.
That's what I was going to say, because if they can come in and change who the leader is, who the king is or whatever, then it's not just a secession just because you're the son of the Pharaoh.
It's not the family stuff. They could come in and remove people. So they actually had disputed his right to be the king. And then finally he convinced them that he would do a good job. But now they're back again 20 years later. So there's a lot happening in the story here. The pivotal role as intermediaries between the divine and the political made the Magos essential in ancient world systems of governance. And we don't usually give them that much importance. So as we go further now, the chief of the Magos Who was the chief of the Magus? Who's the chief Magi?
Daniel.
Did you know that Daniel was appointed the chief of the Magus 600 years before the birth of Jesus? Says here in Daniel chapter 2, then King Nebuchadnezzar gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, treasures, and made him governor over the whole province of Babylon and chief over all the Magus, the wise men of Babylon. See, he was the only one that could answer the question, what was the dream and what does it mean?
Yeah.
And see, prior to him answering that question, Nebuchadnezzar was so mad that his wise men couldn't answer that question that he said he's going to kill them all of them. That would include Daniel. And, because Daniel had been trained to be a part of that group. But Daniel says, well, let me pray and God will tell us. And so he gave all the credit to God. He came back and told him exactly what the dream was and also the interpretation of that dream. And because of that, he was rewarded with magnificent wealth, but more important to him was he became the chief of the Magi, the chief of the Magus, and all his knowledge, all his understanding as a prophet, he transferred over to the Magos. He taught them the prophecies. When the Medes and the Persians conquered Babylon, Daniel retained his leadership. So even though two more kings came in and took over after the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, we have the Medes and the Persians. Daniel still stayed in charge during Darius the Mede and during Cyrus the Great. Meaning that the other Magi or the Magus, I have a hard time with that word Magus, even though he was their chief, he was so good that they kept on keeping him in as the chief. And so he was able to be the leader, advisor throughout all these kings that took over. Well, we have something important happen here. What was Daniel's role with the Magi? Daniel's position as the chief of the Magus allowed him to influence their religious and their philosophical thinking for the Persian elite. He spread monotheism. They were into polytheism, multiple gods. He showed them there's one God over all, taught them about the unseen realm, and then he taught them about the Messiah. And his teachings and prophecies about the coming Messiah influenced them for centuries. That teaching is out of Daniel chapter 9. And what is that teaching? Well, we'll get to in a moment. Daniel's connection to the Magus is often seen as a precursor to the story of the Magus visiting the child Jesus. He's the one that prepared them for the coming Messiah and to look for him.
That's why they're looking.
Keep looking for him. The idea is that Daniel's influence persisted for centuries. See, he's 600 years before Jesus. And it shaped the Magus' expectations that there would be a divinely anointed king who's also the God-man. Did you get that part?
Yeah.
The God-man. Why do you think they came to worship him?
Yeah.
They worshiped him as God. So we'll get to that. All right. So you guys all know oh, am I going too fast for you? I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's exciting. I know. You're welcome to watch it afterwards and pause it.
I know.
So Daniel's 70-week prophecy. You guys have probably heard of that a few times. I know that every so often when I'm not here, we get a special teacher comes in, and I think it almost always will pick out Daniel's prophecies to talk about, because Daniel's 70-week prophecy goes to the exact day of Jesus being died on the cross. And most people don't realize that. So Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks in Daniel 9 gives an exact 490-year countdown to the coming of the Jewish Messiah to make atonement for our sins. These believing Magi, or Magus, faithful disciples in the school of Daniel, knew the prophecies of the coming Jewish Messiah and the timing of his coming. They knew it was 490 years. They've been taught that. They've been looking and searching and waiting. The faithful Magi would have marked the start of the 70 weeks. When does it start? It started in 458 BC. The decree to restore Jerusalem in the 7th year of the Persian king Artaxerxes. And they would have been able to calculate that the Messiah would complete his mission by 33 AD. And they know, because of the teachings of both the rabbi as well as the Magus, that you're not mature until you're 30 years old. So they would have known we got to get there, 30 years before this and find out, if we can find that person ahead of time. And we're going to see that, how they do that, which is fascinating. So they knew the 70-week prophecy. We always think, no, that's just something Daniel did. But Daniel is in Persia, and he's in charge of them. Would he be silent?
No.
No. Not only that, but his enthusiasm, he would have taught them the details, and then they would have incorporated that into their rituals, into their ceremonies, and into searching the stars for when's it going to happen. And as it got closer to that 490-year period, they would have started searching more and more and more. We also know in history, during the time right before Jesus was born, during that time, all of the known empire of Rome, all the countries all around there, were all expecting there's going to be a Messiah. All the other countries have it in their history books also. They were all thinking something big was going to be happening. But these guys knew where it was going to happen. How did they know where? They had this out of Numbers 24. This prophecy is from Balaam. Do you guys remember who Balaam is and his talking jackass? Yeah. All right? I put the word jack in front of it because that's what my mom taught me. Although the King James doesn't put the jack in front of it. But anyways, it says here, Balaam said, Balaam was hired to curse the Israelites as they were coming into the promised land. Yeah. And every time he went to go curse them, God stopped him.
He came out a blessing.
And then finally, it came out as a blessing. And then finally, the last time, I think it was the third time, instead of trying to curse them, he just prophesied that there's a coming Messiah. And this is it. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel. And what you don't know is Balaam is a member of the Magi.
That's what I thought.
All right?
Yeah.
He's a pagan prophet. And that's why he was hired to do this. He couldn't. He could not curse Israel because they were God's people. And so he's a member of this. And so they would have also known this prophecy that the star that rises will be from Israel. So Israel is the location of where the Messiah would come from. See, people just don't talk about how much the Magi's knew. Those guys knew a lot. All right. And they're weaved in and out of the Bible, like Balaam.
But they don't call them Magi, though.
No, sometimes they'll call them prophets or wise men or sages.
Yeah.
But that's in the Old Testament. But if you take that and look in the Septuagint in the Greek, it's Magus. I had to go out and check it for myself. I was like, really? Is it there in the Greek? So, all right, as we move forward, I know I'm going too fast for you. I'm so excited. Early 7th century document lists 3 Magus. Gaspar, he brought gold. Melchor, how do you say it? Melchor. He brought frankincense. And Balthasar brought the myrrh. Okay, so we got that from the 7th century. That's really 600 years after it happened. Okay, so we got that story 600 years after it happened. Well, we also see in the 3rd century, so less than 200 years after it happened, we found this document. It's called the Revelation of the Magi. It's a Syriac document. It was recently translated into English into this book. That's why I'm showing the book there. Brent Landau. And in that book, it shows that there were 12 Magi that appeared. So we don't know what the number was. Was it 3? Was it 12? We don't know. But we do know a lot about what they did when they arrived in locations, whenever they arrived somewhere. It wasn't just, 3 guys riding on a camel. All right, we're going to see that. So let me ask you some questions before I get too far. If you had been waiting for over 600 years to see the fulfillment of the prophecy that God would come in the flesh, to save all mankind, if you knew that and you're waiting 600 years and you're extremely wealthy, the kingmakers were very, very wealthy. Kind of like the Knight Templars. They were the wealthiest people during their time. They collected all together. These Magus are like that. Very wealthy. And you were known as kingmakers. You're known in other countries as the kingmakers. Would you have brought just 3 little boxes
No.
of gifts?
You'd have brought the plane, the Mercedes,
Yeah. So, giving us some thought here.
I always thought there was like a whole caravan.
There is an entire caravan. We'll see that as they travel around.
Well, there had to be a caravan, even if there were only 3 boxes, because you had to protect that stuff from all the robbers on the road.
Yep.
So, they had to have lots of people.
So, this is the traditional view. And this is the updated historical view.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay?
There you go.
And historians say that if there were 12, there would have been at least 1,000 people traveling.
Yeah, yeah.
All the soldiers, all the servants, all the people taking care of the animals,
Cooks.
the cooks, the warriors to protect them, and so on. If there were 3, there would have been maybe about 500 or so. There's a lot of people traveling.
Yes.
All right. Now, I took it out because I didn't have time for it, but I had a picture of all the fortresses that Herod the Great had built throughout all of Israel so that anybody coming into Israel, he would know.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay? He would know if they came from the north, from the south, from the sea. He had all these fortresses all over. And then on the main trails, we've studied that in the past, what were, the trade routes. He had multiple flaming towers there where they would light a torch at night and pass the word along. If you've ever seen The Lord of the Rings, that's in the movie there. They stole that from Herod the Great. Okay? And so there was a communication system. Herod knew that they were traveling, and he was petrified because they're coming through his land. Are they going to stop in his land, or are they going to keep going? All right? And when they come to Jerusalem, he's now terrified. And then they start asking questions. That's even worse. So Matthew 2, go a little bit further now. It says, when they came to Jerusalem, they were saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Okay, the word for saying, that's a critical word in all of this. They marched around Jerusalem saying over and over.
Full phrase or sentence you'd like me to help you with. I need more context to understand what you're.
Yeah, I understand you.
Kicked off my phone.
I know. I know.
God is speaking.
So that was an AI god. Okay, I shut him down. Saying is a critical word. And it means that they went around over and over and over asking everybody, where is the King of the Jews? Where was he born? They're asking. They're stirring up all the people. They're like,
Surely the people know.
oh man. And it finally gets to Herod. And Herod like, okay, we got to roll out the red carpet. This is the Magus. We need to welcome them in with lots of pomp and splendor and get them to come in. And you notice that when they first arrived, he doesn't have an answer for them. He's got to go off and ask his wise men. And they say, Micah says it's in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Bethlehem's only 6 miles down the road.
Yeah.
Okay? So Herod comes back and he drills them. He says to them, what sign did you see? They said, we saw the star rising out of Israel. And now think about that. The stars rise from the east. And they go down in the west. This star came up in the west. Okay? They saw his star rise out of Israel. And they're east of Israel. We don't get that right either. Okay? Most of us don't even pay attention to that part. So, okay, his star rised out of the west Totally different. That's not normal. They knew this was a miracle. This is something different. And they saw that star and they started getting ready to go. It took them a while to get their stuff all together. And they're traveling 1,000 miles. 1,000 to 1,200 miles. But 1,000 miles, and they're in this large caravan. Estimated by historians, it might have taken about 18 months. Okay? So when they arrived there, and he says, tell me more about this star. And they said, well, they don't know anything about it. It's not there anymore. Right? It's not there. You guys realize that, right? They didn't follow it all the way to Israel. They saw it, they started, it disappeared.
Right.
And they're still going, though, even though they don't know now. But they know Israel, and they know how to get there. So they headed there. And then it says, when they got there, he asked them these questions. And they said, it rose. He says, when did that happen? Oh, about 18 months or 2 years ago. We've been preparing and coming. So now he's got a time frame, 2 years. All right? And he says, well, go find him. And then come back and tell me so I can worship also. He's lying.
Right.
We know that because later he kills all the kids there.
Yeah.
Any kid 2 years and younger. Just like, happened with Moses' time. All right, so they're going around talking, and they're asking for the king. Now, the word here for king denotes the greatest and highest king. And in the context of it, they want to worship this king because it is the greatest king of all history. And the Magi are there telling Herod, who has struggled to stay king.
Right.
All right. So there's a lot of anger and madness going on with Herod. He kills his own children. So this guy's crazy. All right. So we get there, and it says, for we saw it, his star rose, his star, not just any star, his star rose, and we have come to worship him. And the word here for worship means to prostrate yourself down on the ground, kiss the ground as an act of worship to God. They knew the Messiah was the God-man. Shocking. And then it says, for we saw his star when it rose. Well, I want to take a moment and ask you, do you think that star was natural? Because a lot of people are trying to find out what caused it. And I've watched some pretty cool videos about it. For example, Kepler, who is a astronomy scientist from Germany, Kepler, he calculated out Jupiter, the king planet, had a highly unusual 3 conjunctions that happened.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And Regulus is the brightest star, the king star in Leo the lion. All right? And that happened around between 3 and 2 BC. It happened 3 times, between 3 and 2 BC. These conjunctions occurred on September 14th in 3 BC, February 17th in 2 BC, and May 8th in 2 BC. So he speculated that this brought together the star, and it happened several times, that maybe that was the answer to what caused this. I've heard other answers also, comics and all that kind of stuff. But this one here was the closest one. But on June 17th, in 2 BC, Jupiter again came into conjunction with Venus, the Virgin, the King and the Virgin, when the two formed a dramatic, brilliant star in the night sky. I said, wow, that sounds pretty cool. But wait, I know something that they're not telling me. I like to study history. And I said, there's a problem here. Herod died in 4 BC. And, people keep forgetting that. History, he died. So if Herod died in 4 BC, Jesus was born before 4 BC. And this stuff all takes place in 3, 2,
Yeah.
So anyways, I said, nah, okay.
I've heard all those, I've seen those shows on TV and, the History Channel. You don't get your biblical training from the History Channel. And to me, when someone tries to explain a miracle,
Yeah.
it takes the
Well-
I wonder about it.
Well, see, I've learned
The point
that,
is you can't explain it.
but I have learned that even when they can't explain it, the timing of it is perfect. God's in charge.
Yes.
And it does use natural things. But in this case, I want us to remember something I said last week that I just thought of this morning. So I put this slide in here this morning. All right. Remember last week when we were talking about those priests, shepherds, and the angels?
Okay.
We said this in Luke 2. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened. Remember, it was a giant bright light boomed down on top of them?
Yeah.
Now it says, the host of angels, they all went back to heaven. The glory, the brightness, rised up out of Israel.
Ooh.
That could have been a star.
They were west of the Magi, and the bright light rose up and went. I'm thinking, did they see those angels and call it a star? I don't know, but I thought that was fascinating. You know, so we got this bright light that came down, and then we're going to see later there'll be another bright light that happens.
Yeah, because you said that the star disappeared, but yet in 9, it says the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child
Well,
was.
that's later.
Yeah.
Okay, the first time it disappeared. Now they're traveling for 2 years. Now we haven't gotten to the second part yet.
Okay, so,
We haven't gotten there yet.
but you're saying that the angels were a part of all this. That's your theory?
I'm saying that maybe they saw those angels. When Jesus was born, the day he was born, there was a star that rose out of Israel. Those angels were bright. And they went up. And maybe they saw that as their star, and it disappeared. But they're on their way now.
They
Because the
wouldn't have been
angels
the
went
only
back
ones to see that.
Yeah, there have been a lot of people saw it. And we have historical records of China and other places recording this bright star. They don't know what it is. They thought it was a supernova, but it could have been. Anyway, so let me go on because we're going to run out of time. There's so much good stuff here.
Yeah.
All right, so we know it as this bright star.
Right.
So we'll go forward. All right, so Matthew 2, a little bit further now. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold,
Yes.
what's that word?
The star.
Behold, amazingly, the star shows up again. Behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Notice it says the child, doesn't say the baby. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they presented him with gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. Let's break that down. Okay, when they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which had been seen was rising. It says, I put a little note in here, they had seen it rising on the night of his birth, and now it's there again.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a different event, but they're calling it a star. All right, and the star moves. Okay,
Yeah.
so when they saw the star, let's see what that word means. They were delightfully viewing it, they were scrutinizing it, and they were intently analyzing and examining it and figuring out where is that star at, because it's not over Bethlehem. All right, it's not over Bethlehem. How do we know that? Well, let me go a little bit further here. Where was the house? Was it in Bethlehem or was it in Nazareth? And this is what it says in Luke 2. If you read a little bit further, it says, and when they, Joseph and Mary, had performed all the things according to the law, they had, Jesus circumcised on the 8th day. They're there. Because they went from Bethlehem over to Jerusalem at the temple. Remember the temple prophets and everything? And then from there it says here, after all that, they returned to Galilee to their own city in Nazareth. Their home is in Nazareth. That's where the house is. Not in Bethlehem.
Right.
So it says that God redirected them a different direction. Because they're not going to Bethlehem now. They're going to turn around and go north to Nazareth.
Oh, I'm in Matthew. That's why it's not adding up.
So what happens? God redirects them.
So they only stayed in Bethlehem for a week and a half.
They didn't even. Oh, you mean Mary and Joseph?
And Joseph.
They stayed there long enough to go get Jesus circumcised, and then they moved on.
Went on back to Nazareth.
Yep. So Jesus is no longer a baby. He's now a young child. Matthew records him as a young child. Luke records him as a baby.
Right.
All right. Matthew says he's a young child when they came to visit him. And the house was Joseph's house back in Nazareth.
That's where the house came from.
All right. So they arrived. Look at that picture.
Yeah, that's a whole crowd.
I can only imagine what the town was thinking.
That one gives Jesus is almost scared. You know?
Yeah. Well, he's like, Mom, what's going on here?
Yeah,
Hey, he could have been. He's a human.
that's true.
He's a 2-year-old toddler. And he's got all these wild people in the house bringing lots of gifts.
That's how Joseph was able to start his own carpentry business.
Yeah, he got funded early. All right, so we're almost done. I'll go a little bit further for you. Going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They fell down, they worshiped him. And then, opening their treasures, they presented him gifts, gold, and frankincense and myrrh. All right, what do you know about the gold, frankincense, and myrrh? What have you heard?
Preparation for burial.
Okay, which one was that?
The frankincense and myrrh.
Well, myrrh.
Okay.
Particularly myrrh. So the first time you see myrrh is in this story. Matthew's the only one that records this. And the next time you see myrrh is at he's up on the cross, and they took some vinegar and myrrh and they stuck it up to his mouth.
Right.
Okay, so those are connecting together. All right, what else? What's the frankincense?
For after the burial, it kind of freshens the air from the stench.
Yeah, and maybe helps mummify, and
Yeah.
it does all kinds of weird stuff. But also, it's a healing ointment. It heals almost everything known. It is a antifungal, antibacterial, antivirus. If you have frankincense, essential oil frankincense, it heals almost everything.
It helps arthritis, I can tell you that.
And then gold.
Gold paid for the trip to Egypt.
So let's go a little bit further here. Oh, notice it says that they presented him gifts along with the gold, frankincense. Everybody always thinks those three are the gifts, but there's more gifts than that.
Oh, yeah.
So we go a little bit further now. And then opening their treasures, they presented him gifts. Opening their treasures. Okay, the word for opening is a fascinating word. It means to have a big entrance. A big entrance. It's like a huge number of the caravan are coming, and they got all their treasures, and they're making a big deal out of this in Nazareth. In a little town that has hardly anybody there. It's huge. It was a massive, like massive wealthy party coming to your house. And to make way or to give entrance a grand, magnificent opening is opening their treasures. They made a big show out of it. Because they're the kingmakers. They don't do anything small. We think of them doing something small. They came in there with their little boxes and bent over and said, "We worship you," and then they left. No, this is a massive thing. It could have taken days. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Could have taken days. Because there was so much that they were bringing in. That's what that picture...
That the people in Nazareth would have more, would they not respect?
We got some other stories from...
Maybe with all
Yeah,
the treasure.
we have some stories that are not in the Bible, other stories about that kind of stuff, and they do talk about that kind of, what the people would have thought.
Or was it jealousy they were spoken
Well,
with?
I don't know, but I'm going to go with what I see here. I see here that they opened and they had treasures.
Yeah.
And the word for treasures is our word for thesaurus. It's a storehouse of treasures. Thesaurus is full of wonderful words that we can use, right? So it's a storehouse of treasures. Their cargo was filled. It's plural treasures. It's not filled with treasure. It's treasures, all right? And then we go a little bit further. The gold was plural. Lots and lots of gold. It wasn't just a little box of a gold trinket. It was a lot of wealth.
Well, they wouldn't have had a very big house. Where did they put all this?
Yeah, that's why that picture earlier was kind of funny, because they got all these people in there, and you're thinking, it's not a big house,
And where did they store them over time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's an example of what could have happened. Treasures for the king.
Lots of Persian rugs.
We don't give this much thought. But if you imagine yourself back in those days with kingmakers coming into your house, they wouldn't have brought something tiny. All right. It's all speculative, but it helps you see the wonder of how God would have blessed that family.
Yes.
All right. What became of the Magi?
They went back home.
They did. But historically,
Oh,
tradition has it that when the Apostle Thomas was on his way to India to share the gospel, he stopped and presented the full story of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ to the Magi. He stopped in Persia and he visited that secret organization and he gave them the full story now of all the stuff that they would not have known. Okay? Then it says they were fully ready for the gospel. They believed Thomas and they all got baptized.
Hallelujah.
Yep. It's a powerful, series of, it was a secret organization. Pagans.
Kind of makes you think it might even be the beginning of the Masons.
Yeah. Well, some people have tied those together with the Knight Templars
Yeah.
and with the Freemasonry. Yeah, some people tied all that together. So now we go a little bit further and we say, wise men still seek him. And that's my call to you all.
Yeah.
After you see this. So all of this is out of that book Katina talked about last week. Rick Renner is one of my favorite Bible teachers. I get a lot of my Greek books from him. And he has this brand new book out last year, but I saw it in Mardell's yesterday. Christmas, the Rest of the Story, has all those beautiful pictures I just showed you. I took them out of my version I have. And I want to tell you that we need to have a Merry Christmas and share the story of the Magi with your family and any friends that you have.
I have a question. If they spent 18 months getting to Jesus and giving him all those gifts and lavishly, why would they not keep up with his life and where he was going?
Well, they may have kept up, but I don't know. I do know that Thomas went to them and shared the full gospel. So,
they didn't have newspapers.
Yeah, but you would think that they would touch bases.
well,
at least
they had
5 or 10 years.
in almost every realm. I have several books on the Magus, and several of them talk about different kings that have them in their on their staff as advisors. And so the thought was that they probably knew more about what was going on, but they would not have known the full story because that's what the apostles were commissioned to give. They were the ones to hold the whole story and bring it out, along with the 70 disciples. So, and we don't normally think of them, but 70 disciples, if you're Greek Orthodox, they're apostles, the 70 apostles. Okay, so you have 70 plus 12, or in this case 11, but we had 12 because of Paul. So let's say you have 82 people who spread all through the world. They would have given the notice over to the Magus. But we do know that Thomas, there's lots of stories of him and who he shared with on his way up to India. And the Magus were one of the set that he did that with. All right, well, let me close this in prayer, unless you have questions.
I just wondered, what was the name of the Star book again?
Oh, my book here?
Yes.
This one here is called The Testimony of the Heavens.
Okay.
It's a, what I say, a 16-week study. It's very detailed. It's a day-by-day Bible study. It's not a wimpy 16 weeks, 1 day a week. No, it's every single day.
Also a less detailed book that's just called Gospel of the Stars.
Yeah, I have several I could show you next week. I had Gospel and Stars by Seiss, S-E-I-S-S. I'll show you more of those next week if you like. I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer, though.
Yes.
Father, thank you very much that you had these people, totally unknown to most of us, who actually were believers and were waiting for the Messiah. And they came and they demonstrated their faith in Messiah. They came and worshiped Jesus, and they had a star one time, and that set them on the path, and they didn't give up. May we be faithful also, Lord. May we know that the star has risen, and we are a member of his family. So I pray, Lord, that you would bless us this week, that you protect us. that you answer our prayers about our soldiers, and that you would be magnified in our lives this week as we share the good news with our family and friends. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.